This may be our fourth episode, Sandeep, but the pandemic continues. The challenges and the landscape ecosystem pretty much remains the same. And for anyone, especially the leaders who may have thought that this is going to be here for a while and let me use all my energy and my inspiration, not only to keep myself motivated, but my troops and my people as well, well, I see them all running out of steam as very, very quickly now. It's becoming difficult for leaders to exercise self-care. So either they are losing on the self-care or they're unable to inspire and motivate the people. We're seeing lots and lots of leaders who were so focused on doing the execution pieces so far, now coming to us saying, you know what, I just need a coach. I need somebody I can talk to who can help me emotionally ground myself, strengthen my being. So clearly we see that it's a fractured leadership internally, while externally they continue to put a brave front as they should. What advice would you have for such leaders? How do they continue to believe in themselves while they still continue to rally their troops?
We have a very short period of time on this chat, and this is a huge subject.
Right.
But we will dwell on what's important. Harlina, I send you emails, and on my email there is a tagline which says that when the sea is still, anybody can steer the ship. It's an old Portuguese proverb.
Right.
These are heroic times. And when I sort of briefly went to Harvard Business School, I remember there was a wonderful professor called Elizabeth Cantor, and she said, it's in times of transition and times of transformation and in times of turbulence that leadership really rears its head up. So these are heroic times. But let me tell you one thing. When you talked about sometimes leaders losing their way in the face of a crisis, I must say that nothing really changes in leadership qualities. People talk about wartime generals and peacetime generals, but I think there are many great generals who work well both in the peace times as well as the war times because they stay close to the fundamentals. What changes? What changes is that the enemy is on the doorstep. Yeah. Bullets are flying all around, which is why you hear heroic stories of leadership from sport, from war. You talk about great generals, you talk about great sportsmen. And in the corporate world, you talk about companies that transform themselves, and therefore you talk about that kind of heroic leadership. So leaders actually count at the point of a turnaround. And if you look at the histories of nations, you will see that great nations were built on the back of the courage of a person. And great transformations in company also happen because somebody took a courageous decision. Now, courage is a word that is used a little loosely, I would say. A lot of people think that, he's fearless. I also belong to a family which has a few senior people who have served in the services. Okay. And one of my granduncles was also in the Armored Corps, my late granduncle. He said to me once when I was a little boy, he says, no, courage is not about being fearless. Courage is about acting when you're actually feeling a lot of fear. So you're actually fearful, but you're courageously acting. And a leader actually takes the people to a place where they won't go by themselves. But somebody says, nay, get onto that bar and jump off the cliff. You will be able to do it. And the fellow believes it. So at the points of a crisis, it's very important, particularly in these times, that you mentioned a very important point, which is the fact that leaders themselves are stressed because they are as vulnerable to the pandemic as anybody else. And therefore, what do you do in an aircraft? You are told as a mother that first put on your oxygen mask and then put it for your child. Right. So that's exactly what leaders need to do. They need to put their own oxygen mask on and then put everybody else's oxygen mask and say, guys, we are headed in this direction and we are going to go there and good reach. I remember when I was in Hutchison and one of my previous bosses, Oshim Ghosh, God bless him, we would have a particularly bad day at work and everything would be going wrong, and he'll come into my room with a cup of coffee and say, "Aaj pata nahi lag raha hai sab kuch acha hoga." And you're thinking, has he lost it? You know, but the fact is, suddenly when your leader seems optimistic, because leaders are very optimistic. We talked about courage.
Yes.
We talked about self-care, but let's also talk about the fact that leaders don't believe that they will fail. And therefore, they work with a great deal of optimism, and the optimism therefore becomes infectious. How many times have you walked into an office where you go to the secretary and saying, "Aaj boss ka mood kaisa hai?"
All the time.
And if the boss is not in the right mood, the whole organization is devastated for that day.
Absolutely.
But if you walk into an office gung-ho and saying, "Guys, what's happening?" My God, the spirits just lift,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
And, you know, like they say, there is a saying, then when there's a high tide, is the high tide lifting all the boats?
Yeah. Beautiful.
You know, so that's what leadership is about in that sense. You know, a couple of days back, I was reading something where somebody tried to, you know, people like to, in management jargon, they like to talk about authentic leadership, realism, resilience. You know, we like these words. We like VUCA and all that stuff. You know, it sort of works well with people. But what is authentic leadership? And I ask myself, as a leader, I sometimes look back and see, you know, people like to follow people with character.
Yep.
If you feel like crying, cry. You are pained by your employees' pain, cry. It's okay. It's all right. You're human. But at the same time, you know, trust comes from sheer honesty. People are not afraid if you tell them the truth, but they get afraid when you don't have a way around it. You tell them, "Look, this is a problem. We've got to deal with it. We have a COVID, we have health issues, we have work issues, business is down, economy is struggling. But you know what? We'll find a way."
Right.
And we'll find a way together. Because like Mandela said, that when there is a success, the leader stands right at the back. But when there's a problem, this guy is taking it on his chin right in front.
Yeah.
And that's what leaders have to do all the time.
But
So,
what's the magic mantra? What's the secret sauce at this time, Sandip? While that is what we want leaders to be doing, but they are taking a beating as well. Who can they look at or for?
you know, you remember that lady called Rosa Parks, the famous black American African lady. She was in the bus. She was an ordinary lowly clerk, and in those times, nobody was allowed to. No black person was allowed to be on a vehicle. And she sat down on a seat. She was 55 years old, and when one white gentleman walked in, she was asked to get off by the driver, and she said, "No, I will not get up." So everybody asked her, "Where did you get the courage from?" And after that, the famous Montgomery, bus boycott started, and the Martin Luther King was produced, and Malcolm X was produced, and leadership happened. She had no titles, she had no positions, like Gandhi and Mandela had no titles and positions.
Right.
But what did Rosa Parks say? She said, "I have learned over the years that when one's mind is made up, it diminishes fear. And knowing what must be done does away with fear." So I think it's very important for leaders to make up their minds what is it that they want to do. They have to draw from their inner strengths and resources. You know, from self-belief, I can lead.
Right.
And I'm going to lead my people across. You know, what skills are required? Usual skills are required. You need to be calm, you need to be confident, you need to be empathetic, you need to communicate. Communication is very, very important. And more than communication, it is engagement with people. When you're doing a Zoom call, you're one-on-one, you're not one-to-many.
Of course.
And therefore, it's very, very important to understand that, you know, I'll give you an instance that when Greece was having a problem with Philip of Macedonia, and they said when Askinus spoke, everybody said, "Oh my God, how well does he speak?" But when Demosthenes spoke, they said, "Let's march against Philip."
There you go.
So that's communication for you.
Right.
And so leaders have to draw upon their resources. They have to get the best knowledge, take the right decisions, be bold about it, understand that collaboration is important. I spoke some time back to you about democratization. Listen to the lowest common denominator in the room. Maybe he or she has the best idea.
Right.